I've asked Dr. Vendramini to start us off by talking about the importance and the prevalence and the influence of beef production in the tropical and subtropical zones of the world. And he's put together a talk for us and knows a lot about this topic, and I appreciate his effort on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Artington. Good morning. And glad to be here today and talk a little bit for you about the beef cattle production in tropical and subtropical places. By now, based on my accent, you probably have figured out that I'm not from Georgia, right? I am originally from Brazil, and most of my career I spent working with beef cattle production in tropical places and regions. So what I'm gonna try to do today is just to give you a brief overview. When we are in the United States, we have that model of beef cattle production, and you're gonna see that most of that is not in subtropical areas, is actually in temperate areas. And although we have a lot of extensive areas in the Northwest, we try to base the whole beef cattle production in our mind like we have here. And you're gonna see that a great majority of what we have in beef cattle production in the world is quite different from the model that we have here. And I'll just give you a tour around the things that we have that may be a little similar or quite different from what we have here in the US. To give you an idea of the regions that we'll talk about, so between those lines, the tropics over there, you're gonna see the region that we'll focus on. And as you can see, between those lines, we have Florida and some parts of South Louisiana and South Texas. But most of that, we're gonna see some places that have very diverse types of beef cattle production. I will focus on the ones that have a commercial production, such as Brazil and Australia. You're gonna see that those have these more extensive, larger areas that we're gonna describe. In contrast to some places in Asia, for example, that they have small holders with 1 or 2 animals, that they have a very intensive operation with low input. But on the commercial areas, we're gonna see something that is more general and extensive. So I will focus most of my presentation in these commercial areas. One similarity that you see among those places that really make a difference in the way that you have beef cattle production and agriculture in general is the climatic conditions in those areas. As you can see, between those 2 white lines, you're gonna see really high temperatures. And you see how they are alike. Again, Florida is quite similar to what we see in Brazil on the temperature-wise. And we're gonna see similar in Africa and in Northern Australia. So what limits us in the forage standpoint, that is my area of research, what limits the forage that we have is not the hottest temperature, but is the coldest, right? So here in Florida, we have the grasses that are completely different from the grasses that they have in Georgia, such as very Bahia grass, star grass, limpo grass. We don't see limpo grass north of I-4, primarily because the coldest temperature that happens during the year. And those grasses are all warm season, and they grow well in that region where we have these warm climates. This is just a rank of the beef cattle producers in the world. So you're gonna see that the ones that are highlighted and surrounded by the red square are the ones that a lot of the production is located in tropical or subtropical areas. As you're gonna see, India is always first with more than 300 million animals. But in fact, they export a lot of live animals, but they are not commercial beef producer. So although they are always first, but you're going to see Brazil. China, they have a lot of the production in temperate areas, but they also have some in tropical areas. And you're going to see Argentina, Australia, Mexico, Uruguay. Some of those places, such as Argentina and Uruguay, they are located in similar latitudes as Florida. So you go to those places, you're going to see very similar things that we have here. how in Brazil, if you go to the massive beef cattle production in Brazil, will be a completely different setup, because they will have these predominant indicus animals that we don't have here. We just have influence of those indicus, but we don't have those. In general, those commercial places, what we see when you travel around is large areas with warm season forages and extensive management. That means animals do not get a lot of supplement. They don't have a lot of, the pastures don't have a lot of weed control. Most of them, as I said, are warm season. They have a seasonal production. That means during the growing season, everything is fine. But in general, they might have 4 or 5 months of drought. And that is really limiting the production. Or you can go to Australia that they may have 8 months or 12 months drought during the year in some regions. So it depends on the situation where you are, but the similarity in these commercial places is the size of the operations and the way that they manage. Heavily influenced by those indicus cattle, primarily because of adaptation, because these animals were selected to be somehow productive in this tough environment. Here is just a map of Australia regarding the stocking rates on different regions. And you're going to see there, close to the coast, you'll have a greater rainfall, so the stocking rate will be about 7 acres to a head. When you go to Western Australia, you may see 1 animal in 110 acres or more. So stocking rates are really low. All tropical forages, most of them natives in that area. When you go in that gray area is the intermediate place, but still, driving in Australia, you're going to see people talking about 3,000 acres, 5,000 acres as the average size, and very small herds, primarily because they are extensive and they have a lot of climatic variation, so they keep the stocking rates very low. One thing that is quite different from us, we have the mindset that we produce a calf here in the US, and that calf will get in the truck and go to a feedlot, right? That's what we think most of the time. When you go to those places, and most of the cattle is finished on pasture. Although they have a lot of differences among places, but in general, more than 90% of these cattle have their whole life on pasture. So to be adapted to that situation, if you think about it, you have an animal that was born and spent 7 months with the mother, and after that it goes to the feedlot, right? This animal don't travel anymore, don't have to survive looking for water or anything. He has everything that he needs right there. When in this environment, these animals go to a place that may have a 3,000 acre pasture, and they need to survive during that time and be finished by 3, 4, sometimes 5 years old, different setups. So that is a very distinct thing that happens in most of these areas. Sometimes when you have the other setup that I mentioned to you about that intensive but low input system, these animals also are fed with rice straw during all their life. Very low quality. They are 3, 4 years old before they can be finished because they have a very low quality diet. So the slaughter age is an average, 3 years of age, but that is not the standard, because it can go to 5, and you can have some places that they can finish at 2 years old on pasture. But the average will be about 3. And we also don't have that very clear segmented production system that we have here, that we call cow-calf, we call stalkers. Here they are all different, and many times they go to different areas, right? We sell a calf here, send to Kansas, stay there as a stalker, and go to the feedlot. Over there, in most of these places, like in Brazil and Australia, the person has everything on farm. He raised the calf, he finished the calf on pasture, or sometimes they may have a small feedlot, or what they call a semi-feedlot. That will be, they feed the animal, but the animal is still on pasture. So it's different from what we see around here. So again, that's bring the adaptability of these animals to fit in these different setups, where they need to be to be traveling around and looking for feed and water. The way that they sell animal in the tropics are somewhat different as well. I think it's evolving over time, and we can see that there is a trend to go through the American or the English standards of to reward people for quality, but in the vast majority that we see right now, the animals are sold as a live weight. You sold the animal as a live weight, or you sold the carcass weight, and you pay for beef. Beef is beef, you know. Very little distinction between the quality, and again, it's changing. And with the exception of Australia, they have been in the English standards for a long time. But if you go to places in Central America, if you go to places in Brazil, we still have a lot of carcass weight sold. And in Africa and in Asia, it actually is not controlled market. That means the person buy the steer and slaughter on their backyard, and they sell the meat right there, so by weight. So there is some differences on those places as well. In general, they used to distinguish between males and females. So I was hearing with a group from Indonesia, they say that sometimes they can pay 40% more for males than females on the beef standpoint, and that was quite interesting. So we also had some differences in weight in Brazil, for example, but in general what they have is a carcass weight, and they pay for the weight. So, and what is happening in the tropics right now, and the challenges that they have in this beef cattle production? A lot of the whole world and all the agencies, and also there is a public perception about to maintain those environmental and native areas in order to keep environmental quality and life for the future. So for many years, beef cattle just expand in these new regions, right? They just clean up woods and have beef cattle on remote places that you couldn't even get there by car. Sometimes you need to go by train and get there and reach those places, like this one that is in North Brazil. Right now, I think this luxury to expand to new areas is pretty much limited in most of the world. So beef cattle will not expand to those areas anymore. It will be very unlikely. So this, excuse me, this option that we always have to produce cheap beef in new land, I think it's getting very limited right now. Excuse me. The other thing is there is a lot of competition to production of grains and greater commodities that have greater profitability. So in Brazil right now, they have this spike in sugarcane production. So everywhere that you go, you have sugarcane production. And also soybean and corn taking over a lot of the areas for beef cattle. And that also has limited. So they give priority to row crops and sugarcane and some crops that have a greater profitability. So what happened is the beef cattle production is getting shrink and is getting pushed to marginal areas and in many times decreasing the herd. And there is also some countries like Australia that they're limited by their climatic variations that they have through the years. So if you see here, the cattle population is the blue one, the red one is dairy. The blue one in 2005, and you see 2015 is the same cattle herd in 10 years. But there is an important thing here. Australia used to be the biggest sheep producer in the world with 180 million animals 20 years ago. Right now they have less than half of the sheep that they had in the past. Because of China and because of wildlife. So the sheep production is half. So all the land that was producing sheep, now they are having beef cattle. So you have the same herd in a much greater area. And that is become, as we see, more extensive, and that is all result of these constant climatic problems that they have. We can learn a lot from beef cattle producers in Australia by the way that they live and the way that they manage their herd. They are always prepared for a disaster, and they always have a plan. So when we here, we are very optimistic, right? We actually think sometimes in South Florida we'll never have a cold weather, or we'll never have a winter, you know? We wait until something bad happens so we can run to buy hay or run to buy feed or do something. And selling cattle is our last option, right? We wait until the cattle lose weight and everything. Over there, they have a group of cattle that this is the one tagged to be sold. So if it doesn't rain in 2 weeks, this is gone. And they have all these plans because it's not a matter of produce more or less. It's a matter of dying and losing the herd and lose everything that you have. Because if it doesn't rain for a year. So you'll not get any better. So also these limitations that we have, and they are pretty constant in these beef cattle producing countries, make the size of the herd to become pretty similar through the years. And therefore, what we have seen is we need to produce more in less area. That's what we need to be done. So, and crossbreeding is something that we're gonna hear David talk about after my talk here, and he's the expert in crossbreeding. I'll not mention about crossbreeding here. I'll just talk about now about some cases of adaptability. That means how to match these tropical areas to what we have. This is a cattle pen on the sale in Australia. I was looking for the black animals when I was there, because we are quite used to have these black animals around here, and I was walking around and everybody likes the red and the white. They tell me that because they are more adapted to the conditions that they have, and it's not just the color, but also the Bos Indicus influence that those cattle has. My question to the Australians was, why the Santa Gertrudis didn't go well in many parts of the world, and here everybody has some, and they love it over there. So it seems that Santa Gertrudis did much better in Australia than it did here, and I think that Bos Indicus influence really helps, and they, according to them, they have a better selection than they had in the US. So this is another pasture. This is in SR Kidman. This is the biggest producer, beef cattle producer in Australia. So we have seen also a lot of different breeds, but in that large operation, 160 million animals, very extensive. I saw more kangaroos in this pasture than I probably will ever see in my life. And I was, people used to tell me about the kangaroos in Australia, and I was thinking that was kind of, they were exaggerating a little bit, a myth, because you drive on the road and everything we saw in the zoo, and we went to remote areas and we started driving through these pastures, and I couldn't believe how many of those were just running around and jumping. And the guy said, I need to decrease my stocking rate by 70% because 30% of my pasture is for kangaroos, right? and anyway, that is the kind of animal that they have in these commercial setups. As you can see, I will show you some, but the forage at this time of the year was the end of the growing season. So they think they are still in good shape. If you look at a feedlot pen like this, you're going to say that this is South Texas, right? But that's over there. Again, same type of animals, some Bos Indicus influence. And they also, finally, I saw some black cattle and some Angus over there that they are popular, but that was really difficult to see. And those animals go to special market, to China and to Japan. And they have Yagus and these black Angus that they really treat well and finish heavyweights because they have premium. So Australia has been, I think, a reference in crossbreeding for many years, and the way that they match those animals to their tough environment. So, and this is just an example of the tough environment. this is the end of the growing season. That means it was raining season. I didn't see one green blade of leaf here on those pastures. And the guy was happy telling me that so far it has been very good. And look at this, very good, and it will get worse from there. So they have done that work to match those animals to this condition, because from now on you get drought and the pasture will be gone, so they really need to adapt to what they have. But it's not an easy situation, it's not an easy life to be a beef cattle producer in those places. On the other hand, I'll talk to you a little bit about Brazil, that is quite different. We also have a dry season, but it's not as severe as it is in Australia. So this will be a typical beef cattle producer in Brazil, Bos Indicus cattle on brachiaria pastures. This is the growing season, so animals will be slaughtered at 3-4 years old, and that will be probably the average production system. One thing that has happened in Brazil, that they have a tradition to keep these Bos Indicus animals for many years. That's what they have for a long time. And crossbreeding was just something that they did in the south area, close to subtropical places. But this is the selling of semen through the years. So they account that as, because we use very little bulls when you have crossbreeding. Most of the breeding is done with AI. And you can see the blue line is Nelore and the red line is Angus. And they were both going up. So AI is quite popular for beef cattle. It's about 14 million doses of semen commercialized every year. And there was a trend that probably starting in 2006, 2007, crossbreeding was getting more popular. And this is the last report that I have from 2013. And the Angus passed Nelore. That was the most popular breed. And the beef cattle production in Brazil was built on Nelore. If they need to have a standard for Brazilian beef cattle, two things happen over the years. I have a short life, but my grandfather used to tell that when they brought the brachiaria from Africa, that changed the beef cattle production. The brachiaria was the best thing that we have so far. It was a forage species that could survive this tough environment. It lives during the drought and is productive. So that was a landmark. The other one was the Nelore. The Nelore happens when they came from India. They brought this boat with a lot of different breeds. They have Guzara, they have Gur, they have Sindhi, they have all different breeds. And by selection, and I would say natural selection, the Nelore was the one that became 90% of the herd. It's because it's really well adapted to those tough environments. As I said, very extensive and very low input. And now I'll give you the last two slides. This is just a Florida example in our subtropical area, and something how our weather can be challenging to the animals that we have. So we did this research here at ONA, and we have this brachiaria species that has an excellent nutritive value. So this is called mulatto. So it came from Colombia, and it came from Florida before I came. But we didn't have a lot of research data, so I decided to do some research. And we did grazing work with these weaned heifers that we have from the research center, like the black heifer over there, like a Angus cross. And we used those heifers to graze those forages to see how was the real quality of those pastures. And when you see what I just said about the quality, look, we have two locations. We have it here in Mariana. So the difference was here at ONA, we did the trial through the summer. And as you have been, if you have been through the summer here, you know what I'm talking about. It's wet, it's hot. We have a lot of diversity here during that summer. When in Mariana, they had to do the trial a little later in the year. It got late summer and early fall. The weather was much nicer and they have much more dry land there than we have here. And you're going to see the protein and digestibility of the forage was outstanding, as we expected. It's very difficult to find a tropical forage that will be as good as that one. And when you have those numbers in the model that we have for animal nutrition at the NRC, and they're estimated that those heifers will get about 2 pounds a day of gain. And as you can see here at ONA, look at what we had. It's supposed to be 2 pounds, we got a half pound of gain during the summer, 4 months of grazing. Water standing, very hot and humid, so those heifers do not perform the way they're supposed to. If you put in the NRC model, that will be 2 pounds and we got half pound. That's what we call the summer slump. Why? Because those animals really suffer during those hot months of the year. However, in Mariana, we got pretty close to the target, not yet to the 2 pounds, but because we have better weather condition and you have cooler weather, so those animals could harvest that good forage and that become everyday gain. So that is just an example how the environment can be challenging, and those beef cattle in tropical and subtropical environment, they face that pretty much every day. As I said, most of them don't go to a feedlot. They stay on pasture, and they are challenged by those weather conditions pretty much during their entire life. That's why I think it's very important to match those animals to the environment where we grow them. Yeah, I would like to thank you for your attention.